So we've got a few updates for you with regards to wherever we are with that ceasefire proposal. First, we wanted to bring you Jake Tapper announcing on his program that Hamas had rejected the deal, which was not exactly accurate and getting corrected in real time. Let's take a listen to that.
Hamas has responded to the latest proposal for a hostage and ceasefire deal, and Hamas has rejected it. CNN political and foreign policy analyst Barak Ravid is breaking this. Did Hamas, Barak, give any explanation for its rejection?
Hi, Jake. So first, Hamas did not say that it rejected the deal. Hamas said that it gave a response to the Qatari and Egyptian mediators, that it gave several comments and remarks on parts of the Israeli proposal. Israel, the Israeli government, Israeli officials are the ones saying that after they received Hamas's response and analyzed it, they treat it as a rejection. I think we still need to hear from the mediators and most importantly, from the White House. That White House spokesman John Kirby said that the White House is still analyzing and studying the Hamas response. So Hamas is saying it just gave a few comments. Israel is saying Hamas rejected the deal. The White House still hasn't said anything of substance. I think we should wait and hear more what the White House says, what the Qataris say, and what the Egyptians say. What I heard from U.S. officials in the last few weeks is that because Sinwar thinks that as the war goes on, Israel will be more under pressure and the U.S. will put more pressure on Israel. This is why they try to mobilize the international community to support President Biden's speech, including the Security Council resolution that passed yesterday, that the Biden administration thought that if Sinwar cares so much about the international pressure on Israel, maybe when he sees the Security Council resolution, he'll have second thoughts on where the international pressure is directed. Maybe he'll understand that he's also under pressure and not only the Israelis.
So kind of a funny and subtly revealing moment there, because the actual story was Israeli officials had said, and that was the Axios headline, right. Israeli officials had said Hamas rejected the deal, and Taffer just takes that as Hamas rejected the deal because he just takes their word for it.
How funny is it that the Israeli journalist, who is an Israeli citizen, and I believe he served in the IDF previously, he's like, hold on a sec, dude. He's like, that's just what the Israelis are saying. That's a perfect example, is that the Israeli media more skeptical of their own government or of their own coverage than the U.S. media.
Yeah.
I mean, well, how else can you that is it. You should look at that and put it in a time capsule, look at it from all time forward. Perfect moment. Yeah.
But I mean, I have to say, like, I've read everything there is to read about their response and where we are, and it's honestly impossible to parse what is going on behind the scenes because it's very difficult to separate the spin from the reality of who is positioned where. The best that I can come to, and I'll show you some elements here that give you a sense of what we know, but I think we're still just at this fundamental impasse where Hamas wants to remain in existence because they're self-interested. They want the war to end and there to actually be a permanent ceasefire and some guarantee of that. And Israel, especially led by Bibi Netanyahu, does not want the war to end. And it seems to be that that's a pretty unbridgeable divide, at least without the U.S. exerting much more pressure than they have to date to make this thing happen. We did hear from Tony Blinken. He described his characterization of what Hamas's response was here, saying that some of the changes were minor, others were unacceptable and unworkable. Let's take a listen to his exact words.
Hamas has proposed numerous changes to the proposal that was on the table. We discussed those changes last night with Egyptian colleagues and today with the Prime Minister. Some of the changes are workable, some are not. A deal was on the table that was virtually identical to the proposal that Hamas put forward on May the 6th. A deal that the entire world is behind, a deal Israel's accepted, and Hamas could have answered with a single word: yes. Instead, Hamas waited nearly 2 weeks and then proposed more changes, a number of which go beyond positions that it previously taken and accepted.
So listen, I'm not portraying Hamas as like a good actor in this, but it's worth being skeptical of the U.S.'s commentary here as well, because they clearly from the beginning, they've framed this as this is the Israeli proposal and they totally support it. And it's Hamas that's standing in the way, when Israel, the leaders of Israel, Netanyahu in particular, were consistently saying, well, actually, we don't agree with what the U.S. has put forward, and this isn't exactly reflective of our proposal. So in any case, you can take that for what it's worth. We also have some Haaretz reporting about, according to Israeli officials, what they are saying Hamas's objections were here, some of the provisions that are considered, quote unquote, unworkable. So they've demanded that the ceasefire agreement stipulate that Israel withdraw from all areas of the Gaza Strip in the first week of the deal's implementation, that if Israel does not do so, the release of hostages will be halted. In a response given by Hamas to mediators on Wednesday, the group is seeking a complete cessation of fire from the Israeli army, the withdrawal of the IDF from population centers on the first day of the ceasefire. On the third day, Hamas seeks an Israeli withdrawal from the Salah ad-Din road, which connects between both sides of the Strip and the coastal road. Sources in Hamas told Haaretz that the amendments that were submitted are intended to ensure the withdrawal and ceasefire be established in the first phase, and that Israel will not be able to evade the implementation of all stages of the deal and return to fighting once all hostages are released. They also want China, Russia, and Turkey to be guarantors of the deal. So again, Saagar, to me, it seems to come down to this fundamental divide that Hamas wants the war to be over, a ceasefire to be permanent, and Israel wants to keep their options open to continue the shooting and the bombing once phase one is up.
Yeah, I just think it's not, at this point, I almost think it's impossible. Israel wants Hamas to commit to a ceasefire, release the hostages, and then commit to not being in power after the war is over. Hamas is like, no, I'm not going to do. No organization, and again, I am not defending them, but what I am saying is that no organization, except literally exhausting every single other option, is going to agree to effectively what is an unconditional surrender. There was a Wall Street Journal article that quoted a lot of leaked text from Yahya Sinwar, the head of Hamas, and the headline was basically like Sinwar willing to sacrifice like hundreds of thousands of Palestinians because he believes that he is winning the war. And I was starting to think about it. I think he is a lot like any of these other like insurgent character leaders who is in like a nationalistic struggle against a stronger enemy. And again, I'm not justifying purely analysis.
Yeah.
But if you look at Ho Chi Minh and others, huge portions of the Politburo during the NVA were like, yeah, we're going to lose 1 million Vietnamese. At the end of the day, there's protests that are happening in the U.S. We can outlast, these Yankee imperialists, and we will win. And they want us to surrender to them. They want us to literally give up our ability to govern what we see as our own country. As long as we outlast them, we will win. And they were right. And basically what he says in a lot of these text messages is, yeah, it's sad, but a lot of people are going to continue to die. You can see that the West is beginning to rise up. There's a lot of outrage over the Israeli state. All I have to do is survive up until the point where their government breaks and international pressure comes, and the way that they are conducting themselves is giving their opponents all the ammunition that they need. Well, he's like, in a very rational way, he is exhibiting his own best self-interest, and he has hostages to negotiate with. And I think I said this on our editorial call. Everyone's like, well, they should just give up and release it. I'm like, yeah, look, I agree. It would be nice. But there's only really a few recorded instances in history where a group actually voluntarily surrenders and puts itself up for annihilation. The Japanese under World War II, and even then, they had to agree that they were going to be able to keep their emperor after we nuked them and effectively annihilated the vast majority of their populated cities, and Nazi Germany, where, again, we militarily occupied them and gave them no other choice after they fought to the death for every single scrap of their territory. Absent that, it's not going to happen, as we saw with the Nazis. We had conquered the vast majority of Germany, and they still wouldn't surrender. Right. So you can see you really only have one or two options here. Like, you can give up on this quote unquote unconditional surrender, or you can continue, and he's going to keep pursuing the strategy which is in his own best interest.
Yeah, there was a revealing State Department exchange a few days back that really underscores the point you're making, Saagar, which is like, listen, if you're going to have a negotiation, both sides have to feel like they're getting something out of it. And if you're on the Hamas side, and again, this is just, to analyze the way they're looking at things, it's like, oh, I'm just going to agree to, you can go back to bombing, and also we're going to just self-destruct and go away. Why would we agree to that? And that exact question, this is D4, guys, that I'm queuing up. That exact question was put to Matt Miller in a State Department briefing. And frankly, his answer was utterly preposterous. Take a listen.
Hamas just a few weeks ago signed off on a virtually identical proposal.
But you just spoke to the points of why this would be wonderful for Israel. And, there's the way you've approached this so far is that Hamas, or the way a lot of people have approached is that Hamas doesn't care about the Palestinian people. They only care about themselves. And so there are, in a sense, three parties to this: Israel, the Palestinian people, non-Hamas, and Hamas. So, but I think the answer to my question, which is what's in it for Hamas, is essentially nothing for them.
So again,
right?
So they claim to represent. I'm not trying to be cute.
They
claim to represent the interests of the Palestinian people.
But you don't believe that, and you've made it clear many, many times that you don't think that they do care about the Palestinian people.
This proposal puts that question very squarely.
But didn't the last one, and the one before that, and the one before that?
And given that this one is nearly identical to the one that Hamas presented, I think it puts it more.
So Madley, by the way, incredible. Just always nails these guys dead to rights. But he's like, you're betting on Hamas to put like the safety of the Palestinian people first. You're betting on like the goodwill of Hamas and for them to not be self-interested whatsoever. In what other sense of this conflict do you hold that view? Now, I would also add to that, I mean, in addition to the idea that you're giving them nothing and expecting them to just, completely capitulate and total surrender, but also Hamas's provisions are designed to guarantee there is, in fact, a permanent ceasefire. And this is something that you can go and listen to Bibi Netanyahu and their, UN representative and all these people in government themselves say. They do not accept that. They will not commit to that. So there also is just this, even if, you want to grow, Hamas has only the goodwill of the Palestinian people in mind, even through that frame, they wouldn't accept without some sort of conditions and guarantee that there is a permanent ceasefire. There was an interesting exchange on Mehdi Hassan's network, Zateo, with the nephew of a hostage explaining his view of Bibi's mentality and the way that he's been approaching these negotiations that I thought was worth hearing out as well. Let's take a listen to that.
Always he and the government always choose the wrong way, and always, ever since October 8th. Okay? Everything they do is directed at not getting the hostages back. This is the plain truth. They had many opportunities to sign a deal. They're always sabotaging their own initiatives. When people from the professional, the negotiating team itself are crying out loud, this thing can't go on. We're sabotaging our own moves. And this is the reality for the past 9 months. Okay? This is why we didn't get any hostages back alive. And Netanyahu was the first to jump on the photo app and push himself inside the frame with his, as he said, called it heroic military operation. The other that came back during the hostage deal didn't get a visit. It's not such a good photo op, apparently, for his base to see people coming alive and well in a deal.
Yeah, and I think he puts that, it's like that's the inescapable truth at this point, because there have been potential deals available all the way along. We know the bulk of the hostages that were released overwhelmingly came in the context of a deal. We also, this is something that's very present in Israeli politics, Saagar, is Bibi has refused to meet with the hostage families in quite a long time. He's just completely shut them out. And in this way, he really is dramatically at odds with the Israeli domestic public. Even a majority within his own, fairly hard right party, Likud party, want to see a deal to bring the hostages home. And that is, the opposite of his priority, because he just wants to be able to continue and accept.
I just think his dance is going to continue. And unless we can literally change irreconcilable differences, then nothing is going to happen. If the condition is, that's the other thing. If the condition, and this is why things could change, if Benny Gantz becomes the prime minister, if the condition becomes release of the hostages first, quote unquote defeat of Hamas second, then we're in business, right? Hamas may sign that deal. They'll be like, okay, fine, you end the war, we're good to go. We're probably going to stay in power. That's fine. You're not existentially asking us to basically give up our arms. After that, though, the military organization, I was just looking back at those text messages that I referenced. Sinwar believes he is winning. He's like, yeah, it's sad. It's true. A lot of people have died. He said, I believe that the Israelis are right where we want them. This is something he said like multiple days ago. There is no way that they would voluntarily just give up military resistance and then give up their hostages. I'm speaking purely from a cold calculation. That's why the North Vietnamese example is a good one. In the end of the day, they were correct about their ability to withstand. Yes, millions of people died, but they knew that that sacrifice in their, communist worldview or whatever was worth it, and ultimately they succeeded. So who's going to be the one, who has more to lose is the other question. Sinwar also references that with Netanyahu, he's like, even if he wins, he said even Israeli victory could be a huge defeat because he knows what that would entail and what consequences that he could invite on the Israeli military if that were to occur. So you can hate him if you want, but these people can both be ideological and deeply rational. And everything that they're doing is quite rational right now from their own self-interest perspective.
Yeah, and that's divorcing morality from the question. It's not just Hamas leaders who feel that Israel is losing and Israel is failing in their objectives. I mean, you can read analyses to that effect in many mainstream Israeli
press,
newspapers. They're saying, listen, they haven't destroyed the tunnels. They haven't destroyed Hamas. They've only gotten a relatively small, less than of a majority of their fighters have been killed. There are thousands of new recruits signing up. You've created a hotbed for future terrorism because of all the death and destruction that you've sown. And listen, the reality is before October 7th, and again, this is divorcing morality. This is not sanctioning anything, any of the horrors that were committed on October 7th against civilians. Before October 7th, the Palestine question was basically dead. Even someone like, this is something, Professor Norman Finkelstein talks about. Here he is someone who's devoted his entire adult life and career to studying this, and he himself had given up because it felt like no one cared anymore. There was no possibility. At the Abraham Accord and these normalization deals that were occurring, and Palestine was playing no part in it. The idea was just to pretend this didn't exist. And we are now in a very different landscape. And Israel is increasingly a pariah country. We're going to get to this new UN report that accuses them of extermination. They're facing genocide charges at the ICJ. Bibi Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant, the defense minister, are facing ICC war crime prosecution. This didn't make it into our show, but we were looking at, was it Intel that pulled out of a huge $15 billion deal in Israel? Their economy is really suffering. The Western press is one thing, but if you go around the world at the way that they're viewing Israel, the way they're viewing this conflict, this has been devastating to Israel. It's also been devastating, by the way, to the US and whatever prestige we had remaining in the world as well. So when you look at all those pieces, I think you have to agree with the assessment that, this has not gone well for Israel. And it's not a surprise because Bibi Netanyahu doesn't care first and foremost about Israeli security, certainly doesn't care about the hostages. He cares about himself. He wants to stay in power, and he wants to stay out of prison too, because don't forget, he's facing corruption charges. So, the U.S. tried to give an alternative version of victory to the Israelis. Biden tried to frame, what they've done already is, hey, you've degraded their capacity so they can no longer conduct another operation like October 7th. Call that a victory and move on, is basically what Biden was proposing to the Israelis. And without any sort of actual muscle being applied on the U.S. side, without any sort of pressure or leverage, there may be some actors in the Israeli government that would accept that, but Bibi Netanyahu is not one of them. And that is incredibly clear and has been incredibly clear, by the way, for a long time. So that's where we are, the best I can tell, with the ceasefire deals. Anything else you wanted to say there before I move on?
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.